Are you grateful with everything that's happened the way it's happened?
You know, to be honest, man, somebody comes up to me almost every week and say to me, like, be honest, man, you said you wouldn't change what happened to you. Like, be honest. Like, you said you wouldn't change what happened to you. Why? Right? Because for most people, when they look at adversity and opposition, if a person goes through something that's traumatic, right, trauma, whatever the case may be, the average person's perspective is going to go to a space and place. What did you lose? How did it affect you? What did you have to sacrifice? What did you have to give up? People very rarely will ask the question, man, what did you learn from it?
What did you gain?
What did you gain?
Ooh.
Right? How did it make you a better person? I know it didn't feel good. That's obvious. I know it hurt, right? I know you didn't like it. It wasn't convenient. But like, what did you gain from it? I just want to know, right? From the loss, from the pain, right? And so for me, it was such a traumatic experience to where I was searching for the good. It was so traumatic.
There is no good.
Right?
Yeah.
It was so traumatic to where I'm like, all right, God, like, what is this, man? This hurts. Like, I don't like this. Like, why did this show up at this point in time? I remember being like, God, just let me make it to the NFL, get the contract,
give me a few
help
years.
my family.
Yeah.
And then, like, we can go through something like, just let me help my mom, help my grandma, help my cousins. Like, when I was a kid, man, I remember saying to my cousins, like, if I make it to the league, man, we can get our own beds one day, right? We just wanted our own beds, right? Right? And so when it happened, I remember seeing certain things happen that it caught my attention, right? But I was so in the midst of what had happened to me that it just caught my attention. I think the beautiful thing about adversity and opposition, when you live with it, it teaches you, right? If you're open to it, right? When you live with challenges, it teaches you. And so the reason that I wouldn't change what happened to me or go back and even change the incident is because of not only the man that it shaped and molded me into, but the way it's impacted those close to me, right? My mother and my father, their relationship was fractured majority of my life.
Yes.
Like, I'm talking about.
Were they living together or no?
No, like never, right? And so they couldn't even.
How many kids does your mom have?
My mom just got me and my sister.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so my dad, he's married and he has 2 daughters as well. But when they had me, they were teenagers, right? And so my dad's trying to figure it out. Yeah. Mom is trying to, young, right?
They don't have tools. They don't know how to connect with each other or communicate or
none of that.
Deal with conflict.
None of that, man.
Act like a child, essentially.
That's it. Act like a child, have a child.
Yeah.
And so it created a lot of hurt, a lot of resentment on both ends. And so for me, when I started growing up, I had a level of resentment toward my father that I very rarely spoke about. And so I would speak to him and we would be cordial when we got to the point of communication. But for a long time, I resented him. And so my mother and my father could very rarely be in a room and it be peace.
Right.
Very rarely. When my injury happened, they had to be in a room. It had to be peace because it was a much bigger issue at hand. They didn't know if they were going to have to amputate my, they didn't know any of that, right? But fast forward a bit, what's happened not only in my life, but in my family's life, it's been phenomenal. Like, my mother and my father can be in the same space and place, in the same room, wonderful grandparents. My father came and lived with me for 30 days after my injury under the same roof, helped take me to rehab for my arm, take me to class, wash my clothes, like what it did for our relationship, what it did for my family's relationships, what it did for me and my buddies, my friends, right? Guys tying my shoes, our connection, what that produced. Like, it was phenomenal, right? The way it shaped and molded my perspective in my life and how I treat people, right? Not that I was a bad person before, because I wasn't. It's just the way that it shaped and molded my perspective and how I view this thing called life every single day, right? Because of what you just spoke about. When you go through something, I asked the guy this, Louis, I was in St. Louis speaking. Pandemic, one of my live trips during the pandemic. And I said, can somebody tell me something good that's happened as a result of the pandemic? Lady stands up. She says, my mother lives in Japan. I get to speak to her every single day. I know if I was working the same schedule, I never would have got the opportunity to have those moments. Gentleman stands up in the back of the room. My man looked like he's supposed to have been in the movie 300. Traps up to his ears, to my yoked up, Louis, right? Starts bawling. And he says, I'm thankful I got to watch my first child being born, crying. He said, I knew for a fact if I was working the same schedule, I never would have got the opportunity to witness that moment. He said, what's something you're thankful for, Ink? I said, man, I'm thankful for 3 p.m. He said, why 3 p.m.? I said, man, I get to race cats and be the first one in the carpool line, right? He was like, the carpool line, really? I was like, yeah, the carpool line. I was like, but not the carpool line. He was like, what you mean by that? I said, the carpool line is extremely important. I get to pick my kids up from school most days. Phenomenal. Love it, right? I said, but more than that, it's about, can I condition my mindset and my perspective that when uncertainty happens, opposition happens, adversity happens, I can put my mind, my perspective in a space and place to extract some good, right? And so with adversity and opposition with my arm, I got a paralyzed right arm and hand. My perspective, my drive, my dedication, my commitment, my essence, my ethos, the thing that makes me Ink, it never got paralyzed. Mm-hmm. That was just my identity in sport.
Yes.
That's what people knew me by in sport. But who I am as a man, that never got paralyzed, right? I'm extremely grateful for that. My right arm and hand gets paralyzed. I get to go to disability services and learn how to write with my left arm and hand. Like I get to try different things, right? I get to go up to the Mayo Clinic, and my first visit there, I sit down and I come out of a room to where they had just shot 4 needles in my back, full of dye. I'm talking about biggest needles I've ever seen in my life. I sit down, I'm feeling sorry for myself. A little kid had to be 10 years old, sits down, I don't know what the condition was. A mother sits down on one side of her, father sits down on the opposite side of her, and it's like they're holding skin up on her face. And I was like, man, I just got an arm and a hand. But I got put in those environments, and I got to see that. Mm-hmm. Extremely thankful and grateful. Most people don't get to see things like that on a daily basis. Right. That conditions the mindset and the perspective to look for good in the midst of adversity, opposition, or uncertainty. I tell people all the time, man, the easiest thing in the world to do is to be negative.
So easy.
Easiest thing in the world to do is complain. Easiest thing in the world to do is to quit. That's easy. Me and you both can walk out of this building and see something on the streets of LA and say, man, that's whack, and complain about it. Mm-hmm. Or we can look at it and say, you know what, man, that's really unfortunate. But if they did this, if they can change this about it, I think that can be a beautiful situation. Yeah. That's a gift and that's a talent that not everybody has. And it's extremely underrated. Extremely underrated. Yeah. But it's extremely powerful when used in the right manner. So.
How did you learn to have the positive perspective in the pain and in the trauma? Mm-hmm. Like, was there someone helping you get out of that? Or did you just flip the switch into that mindset?
Yeah. I would say part of how I grew up, when you grow up in that 2-bedroom house with 14 people, you don't have a lot of choices in terms of what you're going to eat, you know, how much of it can you get. Like I remember watching my mother count change in a old Buick Regal, man. Never forget this. And she was counting up change. She had a few dollars in there. And she was trying to get me a pair of cleats. Never forget it. Shaped and molded my perspective at practice, how I practice. Like if you ask any coach that ever had me on their team, I bet they'll be like, man, that cat used to practice hard. Because I remember moments like that. I remembered as a kid, my uncles would stand on the corner all night, engaging in their illegal activity, come in the house, take the clothes off that they were on the corner in all night, wearing 2X t-shirt, put it on me, I'm 135 pounds, and I wear it to school the next morning. I remember me and my cousins coming and they're saying, hey man, y'all just make sure y'all got a lot of t-shirts from the corner store and y'all just change out the jeans, right? And so I might wear it one day, my other cousin will wear it the next day, other cousin will just be shifting, you know, spinning it around, right? It shaped my perspective. It made me extremely grateful. I remember Christmas Eve, we got our first pair of Nikes and somebody broke in our house and me and my cousin was going back and forth in the room like, man, can't wait till we wear them Nikes. We're going to race. Like any other kids, like kids in the streets of LA, Chicago, Florida, Atlanta. Like we used to race coming up, right? You race with your boys coming up. We used to race light pole to light pole. We got our first pair of Nikes for Christmas. We're going room to room. You know what I'm saying? We just talking trash. Man, I can't wait. We're going to race tomorrow. And I'll never forget when we walked in that room and they were gone.
Oh, man.
And you saw a cat had came through that window. Hurt, right? First pair of nights, hurt, right? And I'll never forget, my mother called my coach, a little league coach, man, that put me in sports. A guy by the name of Trey Hurst. And he showed up the next day, and we were sitting on the curb, and, you know, people outside with whatever they had for Christmas, and we're sitting there. And he drove up, and he gets out of the truck, and he says, Ink, I'm sorry, man. You know, I got the call late. And he had like a little brown bag that you get from like a corner store. And he was like, but, you know, I was able to get some stuff, man. This was all I could do at the last minute. And he had drawers and socks in the bag, right? And I was grateful that my guy showed up, right? More than what he had in the bag, I was like, my dude showed up. And my guy still tries to get me drawers and socks till this day on Christmas, and I don't even need them, right? Just my dude, you know what I'm saying? But it's moments like that that you remember that shape and mold you as a person as you go throughout life. And I think we all have them, right? We all have these moments, right? Whether it be humility moments, whether it be, you know, moments that keep us grounded. It's just we choose sometimes to forget them.
Yes.
But I feel like we all have those encounters that as we navigate and we go and we grow throughout life, it's those moments that keep us grounded, that makes us remember where we come from, that makes us remember how we've gotten to the points that people know us at, that we look back and we think and we reflect on to where we can say, all right, I got it, right? And so it's those moments. On September 9th, 2006, on that day, the outcome of something that I did for most of my life was totally different, right? And so I always ask people and challenge people, like when you say something to the extent of, not you, but just a person, I'll get to it tomorrow. I'm like, who promised you that?